Yehovah Elohim Sva'o. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Please fill me and lead me, and cover me and stir me, and speak through me with your Ruach HaKodesh, that I may speak your written words with boldness and humility to those who listen. I ask all these things in Yeshua HaMashiach's name. Amen. We'll start with the Shema. Listen and obey. Children of Yehovah, pay careful attention and respond. Yehovah is our power and authority. Yehovah works in unity with himself. And you shall act upon your love to Yehovah with your power and authority, with your thoughts and mind, with your entire body, and with all the muchness that you have. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Hand, behold, nail, behold. Ezekiel chapter 40. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, this was the 14th year after the city of Jerusalem was struck. It was on that very day that the hand of Yehovah was on me, and he took me there. In visions, Elohim brought me into the land of Israel and put me down on a very high mountain on it, toward the south. It seemed that a city was being built, that it was there. He took me, and there in front of me was a man whose appearance was like bronze. He had a flax cord and a measuring rod in his hand, and he stood at the gateway. The man said to me, "Human being, look with your eyes, hear with your ears, and pay attention to all the things I am showing you, because the reason you were brought here is so that I could show them to you. Tell everything you see to the house of Israel." There was a wall surrounded the house. The man had in his hand a measuring rod 6 cubits long, 10.5 feet. Each cubit 21 inches, being a normal cubit 18 inches, plus a handbreadth 3 inches. He measured the wall's width in 10.5 feet and its height 10.5 feet. He went to the east gate, climbed its steps, and measured one of the gate's doorposts at 10.5 feet wide, and the other one the same. There were guard rooms, each 10.5 square feet. The distance between the guard rooms was 8.75 feet. The threshold of the gate adjoining the gate's entrance facing the house measured 10.5 feet. He measured the gate's entryway facing the house at 10.5 feet. Then he measured the gate's entranceway itself 14 feet and its supports 3.5 feet. The gate's entranceway was on the side facing the house. There were 3 guard rooms on each of the east gate, all the same size, and on each side the supports between the guard rooms were also all the same size. He measured the width of the opening at the gateway, 17.5 feet, and the width of the passage through the gateway was 22.75 feet. There was a partition in front of the guard rooms, one on each side. On one side, 21 inches wide, and a partition on the other side, 21 inches wide, with the guard rooms themselves being 10.5 feet square. He measured inside the gate from the back wall of one guard room to the back wall of the other, a distance of 43.75 feet, the opening to the guard rooms being opposite each other. He made the posts 105 feet. Likewise, the posts of the other gates around the courtyard. The distance along the passage from the outer opening of the gateway to the far side of the entranceway in the inner end of the gateway was 87.5 feet. There were narrow windows in the guard rooms and to their supports facing inward all along the gate. Also, the vestibules had windows all around facing inward. On each side support were carvings of palm trees. Then he brought me into the outer courtyard. There I saw rooms and paved mosaic flooring made for the courtyard all around its perimeter, and 30 rooms facing the flooring.
The flooring was alongside the gates and corresponded to the length of the gates from outside to inside this lowering floor. He measured at 175 feet the distance of the inside this lower gate that faced east to the outside of the inner courtyard, and he did the same for the gate that faced north. Next, he measured the length and width of the outer courtyard gate that faced north. It had 3 guard rooms on each side, and its supports and vestibule was the same size as those of the first gate. Its length was 87.5 feet, and its width 43 3/4 feet. Its windows, vestibule, and palm trees were the same size as those at the east gate. 7 steps led up to it from the outside, while its vestibule was toward the inside. There were gates in the inner courtyard across from the gates in the north and the east. He measured 175 feet from each outer gate to its corresponding inner gate. He led me toward the south, and there I saw a gate that faced south. He measured its supports and vestibule. They are the same size as the others. There were windows in it, and all around its vestibule were like the other windows. The length was 87.5 feet, and the width was 43 3/4 feet. 7 steps led to it from the outside, while its vestibule was toward the inside. It had palm trees, 1 on each side, on its supports. The inner courtyard had a gate on the south. He measured from gate to gate toward the south 175 feet. He brought me to the inner courtyard through its south gate. He measured this south gate as being the same size. Its guard rooms, supports, and vestibule were the same size. It had windows and a vestibule surrounding it. It was 87.5 feet long and 43 3/4 feet wide. There was a vestibule around it, 43 3/4 feet long and 83/4 feet wide. This vestibule faced the outer courtyard. Palm trees were on its supports, and it had 8 steps leading up to it. He brought me to the inner courtyard, went toward the east, and measured that gate as being the same size. Its guard room, supports, and vestibule were the same size. It had windows at a vestibule surrounding it. It was 87.5 feet long, 43 3/4 feet wide. Its vestibule faced the outer courtyard. Palm trees were on its supports, both on the one side, and on the other it had 8 steps leading up to it. He brought me over to the north gate and measured it as being the same size. It had guard rooms, supports, vestibules with windows all around. The length was 87.5 feet and the width 43 3/4 feet. Its supports faced the outer courtyard. Palm trees were on its supports, both on the one side and on the other, and it had 8 steps leading up to it. There was a room with its entry by the supports at the gate where the burnt offerings were washed. In the entranceway to the gate were 2 tables on the one side and 2 on the other, on which to slaughter the burnt offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. On the outside, as one goes up to the entry of the north gate, were 2 tables, and on the other side of the entryway, the gate, were 2 tables. So there were 4 tables on the one side and 4 on the other side by the gate, 8 tables on which to slaughter sacrifices. There were 4 tables of cut stone for the burnt offerings, 3 1.5 inches square and 21 inches high, on which to lay the instruments for slaughtering the burnt offerings and the other sacrifices. Hooks a handbreadth long were fastened all around the inside of the room. The flesh of the offerings was to be placed on the tables. Outside the inner gate, in the inner courtyard, were rooms for the singers. One faced south alongside the north gate, and one facing north alongside the east gate. He said to me, "This room facing south is for the Kohanim in charge of the house, while the room facing the north is for the Kohanim in charge of the altar." These were the descendants of the Zadok, who were the descendants of Levi designated to approach Yehovah and serve him. Then he measured the courtyard 175 feet long and 175 feet wide. It was square. The altar was in front of the house. He brought me to the vestibule of the house and measured at 8 3/4 feet the thickness of the walls on either side of its entrance. On each side, these walls extended 5 1/4 feet long, 5 1/4 feet from the side wall of the vestibule. The length of the vestibule was 35 feet, and the width 19.25 feet. Steps led up to it. These were the columns on each side of the entrance. How can we learn to love our Creator after reading this fascinating 40th chapter of Ezekiel? We can know that dates matter to Yehovah. Aim for the hand of Yehovah to be on you so you can proclaim the written words of Yehovah. Trust that Yehovah will take you where he wants you to go. Know that one day a new temple will be built for Yehovah. Look with your eyes, hear with your ears, and pay attention to the things Yehovah shows us in his written word. Trust that Yehovah has a reason to show you what he shows you, and it is for you to share it with the house of Israel. Trust that Yehovah is detailed about measurements. Know in his temple there will be offerings, burnt offering, sin offering, and guilt offering. Know there will be singers, Kohanim, descendants of Levi, who is designated to approach Yehovah and serve him. How can we love others as Yeshua loves us? We can proclaim what is found in the written word of Yehovah. Bear one another's burdens. Share the written word of Yehovah with the house of Israel. Produce spiritual fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, and self-control. We'll end with the Aaronic blessing using the name. Yehovah will kneel before you presenting gifts, and he will guard you with a hedge of protection. Yehovah will illuminate the wholeness of his being toward you, bringing order, and he will provide you with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yehovah will lift up the wholeness of his being and look upon you and set in place all you need to be whole and complete. Shalom, shalom.